Next on Worcester News Tonight, new details are out about the conditions a Worcester toddler was living in prior to her death. And an eye-opening lesson, students at the College of the Holy Cross get a real look at poverty. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Kayla Mamalak. Attorney General Maura Healey visits class at the College of the Holy Cross today to talk about issues surrounding students in the city. Healey discussed her journey to office and encouraged students to pursue careers in government and public service. Among the issues she discussed was the fight against the opioid epidemic. She says she will continue to work on the abuse of prescription drugs, which is at the core of the problem.
You know, 4 out of 5 of our heroin users today in this state started with painkillers, and I think it's time everybody take a hard look at those practices. We want safe prescribing practices, and we want people to be armed to be able to take care of themselves.
The Attorney General says law enforcement needs more talented young people. She also said it was great to be back in Worcester as her career began right here in the city. New at 10, Worcester police announced the arrest of 16 gang members and gang associates. The arrest coming as part of an operation with the state police, the FBI, and the DEA. Police say the long investigation actually began this summer. Police also recovered 8 firearms, including some large-capacity weapons. This photo shows some of the guns. Police Chief Gary Jem says his department aggressively targeted gun violence over the summer, months after seeing a spike in shooting incidents. He calls the arrest and getting the guns off the street a significant accomplishment. Police say 5 of the gang members arrested have been either perpetrators or victims of gun violence. A Worcester man charged with murder is being held without bail. It was an emotional scene in court Tuesday as the family of the victim cried out during the arraignment.
You killed my father. Quiet, please.
The family of Carlos Estrada held hands as Anthony Chambers pleaded not guilty. Chambers is charged with Estrada's murder. The victim was found suffering from multiple stab wounds in Crystal Park around 11 o'clock Saturday night. Chambers' girlfriend, Erica Mullen, is also facing charges for allegedly lying to police about her involvement in the killing. She is being held on $150,000 bail. Well, a funeral will be held tomorrow for a Worcester toddler who was found unresponsive in her bed last week. The funeral comes as a new report outlines the conditions the girl was living in prior to her death. Alicia Palumbo has more.
As the mystery continues into how and why 2-year-old Gigi Brown died inside her grandmother's Worcester apartment, inspection records from the Wellington Street home are shedding light on the conditions in which she lived with 8 other relatives, including her brother, sister, mother, and mother's fiance, all packed into one bedroom.
Bed bugs, cockroaches, a concern about mold, and issues with the electrical outlet switches.
Worcester Director of Housing and Health Inspections Amanda Wilson says Gigi's grandmother Melissa French filed complaints about several issues the landlord was allegedly not fixing beginning in July.
They're all maintenance issues. Some of them we would consider more severe.
Wilson says the issues were corrected before Gigi's death, although the bed bugs did reappear in late September. Meanwhile, inspection records show French reported in July there were no children under 6 living in the apartment. Wilson says inspectors did observe children in the apartment, but when they asked if the children lived there, they were told no.
The inspectors were not allowed to fully enter into each bedroom during the inspections.
Gigi's uncle, Chris Postero, told us DCF has been involved with the family for years and knew the living conditions and that the children were living there.
They gave her an air mattress, they gave her a couple of packing plates, and if DCF felt like something was wrong with the way that my mother's household was or where my sister is living, why didn't they step in them before?
Investigators say they're still awaiting toxicology results to try to determine Gigi's cause of death. Her funeral is planned for Wednesday at 10 a.m. in Oxford. In Worcester, Alicia Palumbo, Worcester News Tonight.
Thanks, Alicia. Well, it's not your average simulation. Students at the College of the Holy Cross got a chance to understand true poverty in depth today.
We have a huge segment of our population that do not know anyone who lives in poverty.
Robert Jones says it's a striking realization when you consider almost 12% of Massachusetts residents live below the poverty line. It's why he and the Office of Multicultural Education created a poverty simulation at the College of the Holy Cross.
It's to actually give people the opportunity to understand what it is like. What are the ins and outs when you have $1,800 a month in bills, but you only have $950 coming in?
The simulation grouped students into families and worked to show what 4 weeks of poverty feels like. Each week was represented by 15 minutes and offered scenarios poverty-stricken families face every day.
How difficult it can be, like if you don't have a car, if you only have one car that doesn't function well, and like having to take the bus if you only have like one bus pass, or having to be in 2 different places at one time.
Student Cedric Henderson helped organize the simulation. He says different circumstances lead to poverty. He also says the goal of the simulation is to force his peers to ask questions and work to fight poverty.
What is poverty? What does it mean for these families? And what can we do to help these families? How can I come together as a community, and how can we help one another?
Well, last night we showed you some of the remarks from the challengers in Worcester City Council at-large race. All 12 candidates took part in the Worcester Regional Chamber of Commerce and the Research Bureau's forum at Mechanics Hall. Tonight we are hearing from the incumbents and the 3 candidates for mayor.
Are keeping police and fire on the job and adding classes and equipment to keep our city safe. I support the efforts of administration and our public health department on attacking the opiate crisis, and I advocated for the permitting of the donation bins to regulate and control dumping.
I choose to run for office because I look at the opportunities my parents had and the opportunities I had, and I want my children to have those same opportunities. We have a great city with a lot of complicated issues.
And the issues facing Worcester in the next few years are going to be shaped by new demographics and technology. The environment is going to change much faster than government is going to be able to adapt to it. So those of us who are sitting here have to recognize those forces.
And raised $420,000 to open up city pools and beaches so people could have recreation areas. Dealt with the issue of drug abuse and violence in our community by posting rallies in this community.
Graduation rates and test scores are rising. We have the highest graduation rate of any large city in Massachusetts. Dropout rates are the lowest in 20 years. We are adding new police and firefighters to keep our city safer. Home ownership is rising, unemployment is dropping. Worcester is moving forward because we're all working together.
So you must assess with each candidate, do they have the personal courage to stand up and fight for their ideas? Will the candidate fold when special interest groups fill the room? Will the candidate back down? Here we are at the crossroads in Worcester. We need leaders that will work to advance our great city. Hopefully, we have many here. There is no room for cheerleaders standing on the sidelines.
The municipal election is November 3rd. Well, a Worcester police officer accused of beating a prisoner in a holding cell pleads not guilty today in Superior Court. Veteran officer Michael Motika was released on personal recognizance. He's due back in court in November. Last month, a grand jury indicted Motika on assault and battery charge. The Attorney General's office is prosecuting the case. And police describe a wild scene outside Worcester's Palladium last weekend. A large crowd became unruly and officers even needed to use pepper spray. Several men faced a judge today in connection to the incident. Our Patricia Nicholas was in court and has our story.
Are arraigned in Worcester District Court Tuesday. Their charges range from trespassing to disorderly conduct. Police say they were part of an angry crowd outside the Palladium this weekend.
They had structures set up to be in line in an orderly fashion. The crowd was becoming unruly, aggressive. They were pushing towards the door. They actually knocked down the barriers and pushed them towards the glass front of the building, trying to force their way in.
Worcester police say more than 600 people traveled from across the Commonwealth to attend the I Love College tour party. When the Palladium reached capacity, a large number of the attendees were still waiting outside and not allowed in. That's when witnesses say things got hectic.
But it was just unnerving to watch, disturbing.
Dennis Healey works as a parking attendant across the street. He says in 20 years he has never seen anything like it and says the weather was a contributing factor.
As far as I can see, it got out of hand because of the weather and the people were waiting to get entry into the building, and it was held up for some unknown reason.
Police say many of the attendees had counterfeit tickets, which contributed to the overflow crowd. A majority of the crowd also was not from Worcester, including 5 of the men arrested. They were ordered to pay a fine and perform community service. Patricia Nicholas, Worcester News Tonight.
Thanks, Patricia. Well, there is a request for City Manager Ed Augustus to reach out to the owners of the Pawtucket Red Sox about the possibility of moving the team to Worcester. It could mean big-time baseball for the city, but there may be a big price tag that comes with it. Our Tim McCone spoke with an economist about the prospect. He has our report.
Here's the pitch. Swing and a miss.
After the PawSox struck out during talks for a new stadium in Providence, Worcester City Councilors Phil Palmieri and Gary Rosen are asking the city manager if he plans on contacting the team about the possibility of bringing them to Worcester.
I understand it's a long shot, but that hasn't stopped us before, talking to JetBlue and Walmart and other companies. So, we should at least talk.
In an earlier interview, the city manager did say he had heard of some locals reaching out to the organization. It's exciting some area baseball fans.
I think it would be a really positive thing to the city, bring more people into Worcester to see what Worcester has to offer.
The Worcester Bravehearts play at Hanover Insurance Park at the College of the Holy Cross. Now that stadium wouldn't be big enough for a AAA team, so a new ballpark would have to be built. The most likely spot being behind me at the Wyman Gordon location. Now the question then becomes public funding. We spoke with Holy Cross professor and economist Victor Matheson, who says a major amount of public funding for a ballpark would be a bad mistake.
A large 12 or 16 screen movieplex brings in roughly the same number of visitors every year. And we never talk about subsidizing movie theaters.
The PawSox reportedly asked Providence for more than $100 million, a cost that may outweigh the excitement in Worcester.
What is it going to cost? What is the benefit? And if tax dollars are used, is some private organization going to be reaping the profits while the taxpayers are paying the bill?
A common theory is restaurants and bars around the stadium would benefit, but Matheson says modern stadiums aren't exactly designed to help the neighborhoods they're in.
They actually don't want you going to dinner next door to the stadium. They don't want you buying a beer before the game outside the stadium. They want you inside the stadium buying that hot dog and buying that beer.
Still, Rosen says it wouldn't hurt to ask.
If they're going to ask too much, we say no thank you and goodbye. If their demands, their requests are reasonable, maybe we carry on the conversations. But I just think we should talk to them.
Tim McCone, Worcester News Tonight.
And a central Massachusetts man is at the center of controversy involving fantasy sports jackpot sites DraftKings and FanDuel. Both sites are denying improper conduct but have agreed to ban employees from competing on each other's sites. This comes after the New York Times reported a DraftKings employee made $350,000 last week on FanDuel. DraftKings now denies the employee Ethan Haskell had any improper access to proprietary data to get an edge. Massachusetts Attorney General Maura Healey is investigating whether the sites violate gambling laws. State Treasurer Deborah Goldberg says the controversy shows fantasy sports gambling is very popular and she's interested in the lottery offering a well-regulated fantasy sports jackpot.
It's become increasingly evident that there is a market out there that could impact the lottery, and anything that could impact the lottery we need to take a hard look at and see if it makes sense for us to integrate that into the quality of our games. In particular, we're able to better protect the public